Hi guys, it's Kirsten from WVIA, here with you during the Learn at Home initiative on WVIA TV. We're so grateful that you've joined us, and we hope you've enjoyed seeing your teachers or the region's teachers providing you lessons on important subject matter, as well as extensions to our existing programming each day. They are excited to be able to reach you in this manner, and we hope that you are excited to see them and learn from them. But today, right now, we're going to learn, you and me, about Yellowstone National Park. At 3 o'clock, you're going to be viewing a video on Yosemite National Park. So what we're going to do now is we're going to learn about the park to the east of Yosemite, and that's Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is something very dear to me because last summer I spent a nice week, little over a week, in Yellowstone National Park with my kids, with my family. And so today, during the lesson, you're going to actually see some of those pictures that I took during our vacation. Yellowstone is a beautiful national park with so much to see. So I hope you enjoy this lesson, and I hope you enjoy the show Yosemite, which follows at 3 o'clock. Anyway, let's get started. I've called this lesson Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite's Sister, because what we're going to be doing is looking at Yellowstone, which is a national park almost as popular as Yosemite National Park. Yosemite is on the west coast, and Yellowstone is actually a little further to the east. So we'll go over the location in just a second. We're going to start by looking at Yellowstone facts about the geography of Yellowstone National Park. If you look at the picture, you can see that is a large park area. And interestingly, to the south of Yellowstone is Grand Teton National Park, another beautiful national park. But Yellowstone, some facts. It is 3,472 square miles. It is 2,221,766 acres. There are 63 air miles north to south. So if you're flying from north to south, there are 63 air miles. And there are 54 air miles from the east to the west. Now, 96%, so the majority of the green of Yellowstone National Park is in Wyoming. 3% up at the very top is in Montana, and 1% to the west, that little tiny sliver, is in Idaho. The highest point of Yellowstone National Park is what's called Eagle Peak, and that is 11,358 feet high, and this picture is a great view of Eagle's Peak. Some more Yellowstone facts about the geography. The lowest point is at 5,282 feet, and it is called Reese Creek. Now, when you think about Yellowstone, remember of the size, and if we were to put it together and compare it to the states, the size of Yellowstone covering 3 states, Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, majority of course is in Wyoming, that space is larger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. So that is a very large national park. 5% of the park is covered by water. So there's a nice picture of some of the water that you'll see at Yellowstone. Of course, there's also Yellowstone Lake, which is extremely large as well. 15% is covered by grasslands, and so that's predominantly where you're going to find a lot of the wildlife, like the elk and the bison, and even the coyotes and bobcats. And then lastly, 80% is covered by forests. So the picture on the bottom is just of some of the various forest scenery that you'll see. A tremendous amount of Yellowstone is actually forest. But interestingly enough, when you go to the different features, which we'll be talking about in a moment, they aren't necessarily in the forest. So the tours that you can take at Yellowstone are mostly out of the forest region. But the forest covers the majority of Yellowstone, and that's why there is such an abundance of wildlife in that national park. We've talked about the geography of Yellowstone, so now we're going to look at the geology of Yellowstone. Yellowstone is an active volcano. It is one of the world's largest calderas at 45 miles by 30 miles. So that is an extremely large caldera, which we'll learn about next. So what is a caldera? So I've given you this picture off to the right, so you can view that while I talk to you about the definition of a caldera. Remember, if you would like more information on calderas after this lesson, certainly go to PBS Learning Media and you can see more information on it. First off, a caldera is a large depression formed when a volcano erupts and then collapses. So if you notice, the caldera that's shown in the picture is there is that depression. The ground is deeper than the two opposing sides. During a volcanic eruption, magma present in the magma chamber underneath the volcano is expelled, often forcefully. When the magma chamber empties, the support that the magma had provided inside the chamber disappears. And as a result, the sides and top of the volcano collapse inward. And so that's why we see the volcanoes having, they're tall, and then they have the middle section that's dropped down where the magma and all the hot lava expels from. So that, in a nutshell, is a caldera. Now, typically in calderas, you have hydrothermal features because of the heat that exists in that region. Remember, Yellowstone is an active volcano, so there's quite a bit of heat. There are 5 types of hydrothermal features at Yellowstone National Park. We're going to look at each one. Number 1 is a hot spring. What is that? It's a pool of hydrothermally heated water. So when we think of hot springs, these are naturally occurring pools of very heated water. They can get extremely hot. And here is an example of a hydrothermal hot spring. This is called Dragon's Mouth Hot Spring, and it is at Yellowstone. And this is a picture I took as we approached Dragon's Mouth. It is literally steaming 24/7. And it's steaming so heavily that there's a sound that emanates from Dragon's Mouth, a hissing sound the entire day. So that is one of the more beautiful and astonishing sights of a hot spring at Yellowstone. In this video, we're actually taking a look at the walk to Dragon's Mouth. So as we walk the path in Yellowstone, we are approaching Dragon's Mouth Hot Spring. So you can actually see it as though you are a tourist at Yellowstone. Let's watch. And as you can see, the bridge is up off the ground because remember, the ground is very hot and thermally charged. It's also dangerous to just step because the ground is somewhat unstable. So they have these paths that are raised up so that you can safely see all of the hydrothermal features such as Dragon's Mouth. Look at all that steam. And notice the forest all around as well. But there it is, Dragon's Mouth. See how hot that water is and how hot that steam is rising out of the hot spring. Okay, the next type of hydrothermal feature that we are going to see is what's called a mud pot. That's a hot spring that is acidic enough to dissolve the surrounding rock and typically also lacks water in their system. So you're going to see a lot more steam as opposed to a hot spring, which is there's water there, there's water present. Now, one of the more famous of the mud pots is called Mud Volcano. Early explorers to Yellowstone described this feature as the most repulsive and terrifying sight. It's a volcano-like cone 30 feet high and 30 feet wide, and with mud erupting to cover the tall trees. So in this picture, you're only seeing a portion of it. Now, when Nathaniel P. Langford visited it in 1870, however, he saw a seething, bubbling mass of mud, more of what you see in that picture. It's rich in iron sulfides and powered by heavy gas discharge. The water constantly undercuts the back wall. So you can see that that is one big bubbling mass of mud. It doesn't smell real good either, so I will tell you that. The next type of hydrothermal feature is what's called a geyser. I'm sure you've heard of geysers. There are some pretty famous ones, and one in particular we're going to look at. It's a hot spring with constrictions in their plumbing, which causes them to periodically erupt to release the pressure that builds up. So when you see a geyser, it starts out slowly, and then it builds, and then eventually the water spews extremely high up into the air. And here it is, Old Faithful, the famous geyser, erupting. Remember that it erupts with some astonishing regularity. So each day there's a sign outside of Old Faithful, and it actually gives the times that it's going to erupt. And let me tell you, it's very regular. So here we see on the left side, it's starting to erupt. So there's some gas, you can see the steam, there's some aggression in terms of the water spout, but nothing quite like it's going to get. So as you can see there's lots of water coming out, it's getting higher, it's getting more intense in terms of the eruption. And then look here, it's going pretty high up in the air. Now, a lot of that is steam, but you can see that the water is literally erupting up even higher now. So that is one amazing geyser. And to see it in person is really quite amazing too. You actually feel the spray hit you, the warm water, and there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of hissing that goes on when Old Faithful erupts. Now, when I went, it wasn't very busy. It was at the end of August, so we really got a great view of Old Faithful. But as you can see here, people really love to come and see that particular geyser, that hydrothermal feature, erupt each day, several times a day, in fact. The next hydrothermal feature we're going to discuss is called a travertine terrace. Now, these are beautiful, very unique structures. A travertine terrace is formed from limestone. Thermal water rises through the limestone, carrying high amounts of the dissolved limestone, or calcium carbonate. At the surface, carbon dioxide is released and calcium carbonate is deposited. Now, this forms the travertine, which is the chalky white mineral forming the rock of travertine terraces. The formations resemble a cave turned inside out. There are colorful stripes, and they are formed by thermophiles, or heat-loving organisms. And this is what a travertine terrace looks like. That is all limestone, calcium carbonate. It is chalky, that chalky white with the different color swirls due to the thermophiles. This is really an astonishing view when you consider the forestry, the grasslands that exist at Yellowstone, and then you come across this. The entire area is warm. You can hear a subtle hissing, but these travertine terraces are absolutely stunning. And the fifth type of hydrothermal feature at Yellowstone is what's called a fumarole, or a steam vent. These exist when a hydrothermal feature has so little water in its system that the water boils away before it even reaches the surface. So steam and other gases emerge from the feature's vent, sometimes hissing or even whistling. Steam vents are often superheated with temperatures as high as 280 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that is extremely hot. And they don't smell real well either. That steam and those gases are sometimes very sulfuric. It actually, when I was near some of the fumaroles, it smelled like rotten eggs. We've learned about the geography of Yellowstone briefly. We've learned about the geology of Yellowstone and the hydrothermal features. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the areas of Yellowstone National Park. And we're going to start with, as you can see on the map of Yellowstone, I've got a circle around what's called Canyon. We're going to start at Canyon area. We're going to start with Canyon Village area. And each time we visit a new area, we're going to talk about the notable area and structures that exist there. Now, if any of this interests you, I would recommend going to the National Park Service on the internet and looking up Yellowstone National Park. They give you information on each of these areas. So some of the notable structures in the Canyon Village area are Artist's Point, an area that is absolutely beautiful in terms of the colors and the scenery. There is Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River. There's Mount Washburn, which is an amazing view at the top of Mount Washburn of almost all of Yellowstone. It's an incredible view. There's some really cool ranger stations up there as well. And of course, the Lower Falls. Now, if you look at the picture that I've provided here, you'll see that we've captured Lower Falls. I loved the view with the forests surrounding it and then the falls there. Now at Artist's Point, we have something really astonishing. It's called the Grand Prismatic Spring. This is a picture of it. It was my favorite part of the entire trip. This was such a beautiful sight to see with the water steaming, all the beautiful colors. So out deeper, you see the beautiful blue water, but a little closer to us, the water had that orange look, and then there were features under the water that made just the entire scene remarkable. So it is no wonder that this is called Artist's Point. Lots of color and lots of texture. It's really quite amazing. The next area that we're going to look at is called Mammoth. So when we're talking about this region, it's up in the upper left part of Yellowstone. And if you remember from the original map, that's up by the border of Wyoming and Montana. So 3% of the park is in Montana, and you can see a little bit of it there. The north entrance also is near Mammoth. We call the Mammoth area the Mammoth Hot Springs area because that is one of the most important features or structures in this region of Yellowstone National Park. So of course you have Mammoth Hot Springs. You also have Fort Yellowstone, which existed at the turn of the century in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the military had control of, the government and the military had control of Yellowstone. That fort was the center of activity. But then you have what's called the Obsidian Cliff. So if you look at the picture, that is actually Obsidian Cliff, and you can notice the black rock, the beautiful shiny black rock there. It is really a beautiful sight. Nothing like you'd see out here in Pennsylvania in terms of the blackness of it, except for perhaps when we think of coal. Interestingly enough, Yellowstone is in Wyoming, obviously. 96% of it is in Wyoming. And Wyoming was named after the Wyoming Valley in Pennsylvania. So the people who settled in Wyoming said it reminded them of the Wyoming Valley in Pennsylvania, and thus the name of the state was born. The next region of Yellowstone is significant in that if you go to Yellowstone for a vacation, such as my family did in the last summer, you will go to Fishing Bridge, Bridge Bay, and lake areas. And I've given you a circle around those. You'll see that There's a giant body of water there too, and that's Yellowstone, Lake Yellowstone. There's Yellowstone River, but this is where all the camping is. So in Fishing Bridge Lake and Bridge Bay region, what you're going to see is quite a bit of human activity. So there's the fishing bridge, and you can go there, have a great view of Yellowstone, the lake in Yellowstone. There's the Lake Hotel. So if you are not interested in camping, there is a hotel for you to stay in, but you have to call way in advance in order to get a room. And then there's camping. If you'll notice the picture, that was our home for about a week. We were at Bridge Bay. So we had our tent, we had our fire pit, that's where we stayed at night, we had our meals there, we cooked over the fire, it was a lot of fun. One of the interesting features of Bridge Bay is that there's lots of woods around. So in the morning when we woke up, we had some elk paying a visit in between the campsites. So that was exciting. And certainly unlike anything I had ever experienced while camping. The next region of Yellowstone that we're going to look at is off to the west. So as you can see with the red circle, it's north of Old Faithful, it's south of Mammoth, and it's a little to the west of Bridge Bay Lake and Fishing Bridge. So let's take a look at what's popular in that region. Some of the notable areas and structures are actually the Madison River, but more importantly, the wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife, especially in the spring and summer, in the Madison and West Yellowstone areas. This is my son having a look at the bison that was just off the path. This was a lone bison, as we could see, and he just was chomping on the grass while we all watched. My son thought it was pretty cool because that is not a small creature. So we don't have anything like that in Pennsylvania, that's for sure. And so he really enjoyed watching the bison. The next region is what's called Norris. So that is to the north of Madison. It's to the south of Mammoth, and it is to the west of Canyon. So let's take a look at what Norris has to offer. In the Norris area, you have the Norris Geyser Basin. You have Roaring Mountain, which were the fumaroles that we saw the video on. And you also have the Colloidal Pool. This is a picture of that pool that I took when we were on our vacation. It is an absolutely beautiful shade of blue in some areas, and then a chalky white in others. It steamed the entire time. So this was considered, I believe, a hot spring. But this was, in my opinion, one of the prettiest colors of blue that I had ever seen. Now, we've talked about Old Faithful as a hydrothermal geyser. We're going to talk about that region now as one of the more popular regions for viewers and visitors of Yellowstone National Park. The notable structures in the Old Faithful area are many. So you have the upper, midway, and lower geyser basin, lots of hydrothermal features, lots of beautiful scenery. You have Old Faithful Geyser. You have the Fountain Paint Pot, which is a mud pot. We learned about that hydrothermal feature. You have the White Dome Geyser, and you have the Great Fountain Geyser. This picture is of the Great Fountain Geyser in the evening. Now, I'm going to have to say this was my favorite part of the entire trip when we were in this particular region. Now, this is a larger region. It contains Tower Falls and a few other very notable structures and areas. It's to the more east of what we've seen thus far, and it's up by the entrance to the park in Montana. Now, this is called the Tower Roosevelt area, and the most important feature of this area is what's called the Lamar Valley. The Lamar Valley is known for its wildlife. While we were visiting Yellowstone, we came upon a film crew with National Geographic, and they were filming grizzly bears. So we actually got to watch some of the bears that they were filming, which was really interesting. But the Lamar Valley isn't just known for grizzly bears. It's also known for their elk, their bison, their deer, coyote, red fox, bobcats, cougars, and of course, like I said, grizzly bears. This is a picture of my son, and he's taking a look at a bison that they have on display to give you an idea of size. This is not an overly large bison, but it's good to get a perspective. So when we were at the Lamar Valley, not only did we see the filming of the grizzly bears, we saw a coyote in a field, which was pretty neat. They're very light colored coyotes, as opposed to the ones that are more, that are out here that are a little darker in color. We saw red fox, of course. We definitely saw elk. But next, I'm going to show you a video of how close the bison are to you when you are in the Lamar Valley. So this is me filming while we were in our car at the Lamar Valley. Look at how close those bison are to us. Now here, he was right on the side. They're just eating. They don't even care. They're so used to tourists that they just all congregate and eat and don't pay any attention. It was really cool to see them so close. So I hope you enjoyed that lesson on Yellowstone National Park. And I hope it inspires you to do some further research on the national parks or Yellowstone, or as you will see at 3 o'clock, all about Yosemite. Remember to go to PBS Learning Media for more information on these national parks, or even the wildlife that you discovered, perhaps, in some of the pictures, like the bison. Certainly those are some amazing animals, and you can learn more about them on PBS Learning Media. So we hope you had a great time learning about Yellowstone National Park. We hope you have a great time learning about Yosemite National Park at 3 o'clock. And we hope that you join us again tomorrow for these important lessons with your teachers on WVIA TV. Thank you for joining us with Learn at Home. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the shows.